Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and today's video is going to cover loose graded vintage Star Wars figures. I think everything I've got are UKG and AFA, no CAS in this video, I believe, but some really interesting prices, very nice figures, some foreign variants as well, some buy it nows as well as auctions, and thank you as always to my Patreon supporters. You guys get buy it now alerts for items on eBay. And a number of you picked up some items in this batch that I wanted to cover in today's video. So thanks for those of you that support the channel. It means a lot to me. All right, so let's take a look. We're going to start off with a double telescoping saber Luke Farm Boy. This is the lowest price I've seen for one of these in a while. I thought this was a good deal at $901. It was an older case style, but still a pretty clean. It's not the oldest of the old case style, but it's, you know, not the newest where they kind of pull out the inner filament and have a nice little case for that. So it's got the little divider between the accessory and Luke, but it's an AFA 75, not the highest grade, but 901, I feel like is a really decent entry point for a double telescoping Luke Farm Boy. That seems like a very fair price to me. I would probably personally send that back in and get it recased with the newer case style. There's something about having the inner filament all the way pulled out and really showing off how much different it is than the standard saber that really makes it pop. I like the way it looks. I mean, it looks fine the way it is. I'm not trying to say it's bad, but I'm just saying that the newer case style really does do it a lot of justice for what, you know, for how rare the figure is. But 901, that's a price I'd pay. That's a good price right there. This was an interesting sale. This was a Spanish PBP hammerhead, but the eyes were facing forward. Look how crazy the eyes look. Usually they kind of veer to the left, and this one, the eyes are facing forward. And it's a UKG 90. PBP straight eyes, 90%. So high grade. But the price really shocked me. 380 pounds in an auction, which is 480 US dollars. I did not expect it to go that high. I got to be honest with you. But that's, you know, it is a rarity. Usually the eyes are painted in a different fashion. There are no COO variations for Hammerhead that will face forward as well. I have a no COO, but the eyes are facing left. But I just saw one on eBay that where the no COO with the eyes facing forward. So again, it's a subtle variation, but it really does have a different look to it relative to the standard figure. And that price did not disappoint. That was a big number there. Next up was that short pour COO for the Death Squad Commander. And you can see there on the label, short pour mold, Hong Kong. And what that really means is that the plastic that was injected into the mold to make this figure was not enough. And so as a result, it didn't quite fill in the Hong Kong on the back of the leg. And it kind of just looks like a jumble of letters. And that does happen sometimes. It's not like, you know, it's super common, but it does happen. So it's a little bit of a factory error is how I would classify this figure. And it sold for 87 pounds, $110. Pretty cool variation, that factory error, if you will. Next up was just a standard no COO Han Solo, but a beautiful example graded UKG 85 with 90% paint. That was a very clean looking no COO for 135 pounds in a buy it now, 170 US dollars. That's one I still want to pick up at some point. That's a really nice looking figure there, though. Very much an 85 based on the colors. Here's one I sent out to my Patreon supporters, and I said, grab it while you can. I thought this was a great deal. This is a Spanish Puck Apple Head Yoda. So you can see there the bright green bright green apple head Yoda that doesn't match the color of the body, and it's a Spanish pot. And there was a UKG 85 that was at auction that sold for, it was like $1,300 plus. This was several months ago. This is a UKG 80, and it was listed for less than half that price. It was listed for 495 pounds, which is 626 US dollars. And the gentleman that bought it was a Patreon supporter. He got a little bit off of that. So congrats on that one. That's a very tough variation to find. Beautiful figure, Spanish Puck Apple Head Yoda. I've got a couple of different Droopy McCool's that sold. This was a UKG 90, very high grade. And I do think that there's a market for loose graded band members where they're graded separately. I feel like every time they pop up on eBay, whether the AFA or CAS or UKG graded, there is a lot of action on them. Not all the time, but it seems like there is because they just don't show up that often. And I've got some examples that kind of support that will shock you. And admittedly, they are higher prices for higher grades for higher prices for higher grades. But this one was a 90 gold level and sold for $372 US. The 85 for Max Rebo sold for $206. And that one was every bit of an 85. There was a slight color differentiation between the arms, head, and the body, which does happen with this figure. If you get one that's fully dark blue, it's very rare. They just have discolored over the years. But, I would call that an 85 in my opinion. And 206 was a healthy number there. Now, this 85 UKG was for size snoodles and sold for a very reasonable price of 88 pounds, which is $111. But check out this one, and I apologize I didn't look up what the final accepted sales price was, but I guarantee you it was 4 figures because this seller does not take off big discounts. So I would wager it's over $1,000. This is an AFA 95. AFA 95 for size snoodles with the black microphone archival case. This seller always has really high grade items. It was listed for $1,600. $1,600. Probably the only one on the population report is my guess. I forgot to look up what the sales price was before I started this video, but I'm sure it was a massive number because this seller does not come down usually that much off of the price when you're talking about 95 grades. But I had to show that one because I found that one just on a general search after it already closed. And that's a pretty unique item. And, certainly there's a market out there. And I've got some friends that are really into 95 grades, 90 pluses, and they'll pay big money for them because they're one of two on the population report. And those tend to hold their value pretty well because there's always going to be that really small subset of market that wants the best of the best. And, that just seems to be my experience looking at, that upper tier market. And we've seen it, right? We've seen it like even with Mint on Cards. We saw it at the last Hakes auction where that AFA 90 32B Yoda, that sold for $16,000. And it was only a single score. It didn't even have subscores, so it was an older grade. Still sold in an auction for $16,000. So there's always going to be that upper tier whale type of market that's willing to pay the big money for these upper grades. So I just wanted to show that one. Here was another one I sent out to my Patreons. I know one of you got it because it did give the channel credit. I made like $1.50 on it, but it's okay. I appreciate you guys using the links that I send out. This is a China COO Lando, UKG 85. A little bit tougher to find China COOs for Lando, for Leia Bespin. That's another one. If you see the Leia Bespin gown in a China COO for a reasonable price, grab it. It's very tough to find. I've only seen 2 that have been on eBay this year that were both UKG graded, and maybe three of them, but it's very, very rare to see those graded for whatever reason. You would think that they would be pretty common since they appeared on Return of the Jedi card backs, but they just don't show up loose graded very often. So I thought that was a good deal for a China COO. Next up, this was an interesting one. This was labeled dull gray, IG88, and the color is significantly darker than my gray. I kind of held it up and I looked at it in different angles and things like that. I have the Hong Kong labeled gray by AFA, but this is labeled dull gray by UKG. And I was like, well, maybe that's just like being fancy. But I do think that this is a different variation. It's a different type of plastic used. My gray is a much lighter plastic. And, again, maybe there's some color manipulation going on in the photos, but I've looked at it at every angle, and this is a significantly duller, darker gray than mine. And it was only 125 pounds, which is $158. But I do think that for whatever reason, for this particular batch, maybe they used a different or darker type of plastic. Maybe they didn't mix it the same color. I don't know. But I like that labeling by UKG as a dull gray because it's a totally different color than my gray labeled by AFA. So congrats whoever got that one. Here is the gray and that sold that kind of shows the difference. And again, it's hard to do apples to apples because of lighting and things like that. But even at different angles, you can see that it's just not quite the same plastic that was used. So this is the gray IG88 as AFA labels it. This was an AFA 90. AFA 90 that sold for $293. But again, mine looks just like this. It's a lighter, very kind of shiny gray color, versus this one that it's a much duller, darker gray. So I do think that this is a different variant. Again, it might just be that certain batch had a different kind of plastic used, but I at least wanted to point out the differences. And again, I've got an 85 for this one, and it's very similar to this, where it's much brighter and shinier. And that was a beautiful figure, a 90 grade. It was going to go for a lot of money at $294. Here was another one, and I apologize if I didn't pull it up. Here it is. Okay, yeah, I wanted to kind of do these in order since this was the same seller. This was a unique one. This was a Jawa Hong Kong labeled green stitch on seam. So this has got light brown stitches for the arms and then the bottom of the robe right down here. But around the top, around the hood area, where it zips up, it's a light green color. And so it's labeled green stitch on seam AFA 85. This is population 1 of 1, according to the AFA population report. So again, this is probably a case where maybe they ran out of thread as they were making this robe. And so they just decided to finish it up with the seam around the hood in a light green color. Who knows? But either way, it's really cool. And to get a 1 of 1 for $420, probably a number I'd spend. That seems like a good buy to me, to get 1 of 1 on a weird kind of, whether it's a factory error or whatever, it's labeled differently by AFA, and that usually will command some big money. Next up was the long eye tubes Tuscan Raider. That's always a desirable figure. That price has come down a little bit over the last year or so. An AFA 85, which this one is, sold. This one sold for $189. 9 months ago, this was going for $230 to $260. So this one's come down, and if you're looking for that particular variation, now's a pretty good time to try and grab one. It's got the long eye tubes. That just means the eyes have longer tubes than normal for the Hong Kong COO. And again, I've got an 80 plus. I think I paid like $130 for it, somewhere in there, maybe $160. But now you can get an 85 for not much more at $189. So I thought that was a really good buy relative to what a usual long eye tubes Hong Kong Tuscan Raider used to sell for 6 to 9 months ago, which was about $230 to $260. Next up, we've got a molded face snap cape Luke Jedi. AFA 85. It sold for $530 and a buy it now. And I have a molded face sewn cape, I think. It doesn't look like it's got the snap cape inside, and it's not labeled as such. This one is labeled molded face snap cape. Mine just says molded face. It's a Taiwan COO. I bought mine on Certified Link. I think I paid around $325 for mine, which I thought was a good deal at the time. And this one's got the snap cape, so it should go for a little bit more. It's a little bit more rare. But the molded face Luke Jedi is always a desirable variant. That one did sell at $530. Some last 17 that sold, a lot of UKG here. This is a UKG 90 Barada for 185 pounds, which is $234. Very good deal for a 90 grade gold level. I think that's a smoking deal. Really good deal there. And here were some with the coin. This was the Amanaman with the coin, UKG 85 for $318 US. That's not much more than what these can go for loose without the coin. So that was a good deal. This was the Imperial Gunner with the coin, UKG 85. That one sold for 340 pounds, which is $430. Again, a very fair deal there. EV99 with the coin, UKG 85, sold for $444. Again, all of these prices I think were very fair, given that they included the coin, graded high grade, and you're spending anywhere from 20% to 30% above loose, complete, ungraded prices. I thought those were really good deals there. This obviously went for a lot of money. This is the Anakin because it had the coin. And, we all know that the Anakin Power of the Force mint on card is 4 digits. You know, it's $10,000 plus in high grade condition. So the coin alone can be very expensive. And so this one sold for 420 pounds, which is 530 US dollars. That was only a UKG 80. But again, that coin by itself is very tough to find and very rare. Here was an 80 plus grade Luke Stormtrooper old case style. That's too much to pay. Don't pay $920 for it. That's what this sold for in a buy it now situation, apparently. That's too much. They have come down in price. I've seen AFA 85s go for, you know, $600, $700, $800 ish max, maybe $850 at the top end. For an 80 plus grade old case, I probably wouldn't be spending more than $600, maybe $650 tops. And even that's kind of pushing it, if you ask me. $920 in a buy it now is too much for an AFA 80 plus old case style. Finally, we had an AFA 85 R2D2 pop-up lightsaber. The sticker had yellowed since grading. This is obviously a an older case, and the sticker is definitely yellowed since grading. That one sold for $16.75. Would AFA still give it an 85 grade? I don't know. I don't know how they factored the sticker in on this R2D2, because literally almost every single one that I've seen in the last 2 years has yellowing to the sticker. I just think that they all have at this point. It's very, very rare to see one that is still white. So would they still give it an AFA 85 if you send it back in for recasing? I have no idea. But $16.75 is what this sold for in a buy it now situation. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please do leave me a like, as it does help out with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon.